Hi everyone, again. I'm almost ready to start. We'll do the usual Indian standard time of x equals x plus 2 or something like that. Okay, so installment 4 of the Wicked India series. And today's topic is on collective wisdom. And I would say of the various topics that we're going to cover in this seminar, it's both the most, I think, important and the most pretentious. I'll try to be as unpretentious as possible, but nevertheless emphasize the importance. The goal of this meeting today is that we're going to transition from the I-centric view to the we-centric view that I've been talking about in some of the newsletters. So from the individual visions that you've all shared, actually many of you, about 70 of you shared in your homework, to the somewhat group visions that we want to evoke in this session, right? And the goal of the course, if you remember, is to evoke your wisdom and the instructional materials, such as it is to make that happen. So it's a flipped classroom in that sense. Okay. So in the context of climate change, what we are saying is that India's story, climate grammar, that's sort of the line of the whole course, right? Which is that we want to reimagine India itself, but we want to do it in such a way that response to climate change is built into that reimagination. So this is a topic that keeps coming up again and again. It may be that we talk about things that have nothing to do with climate change. And in fact, maybe the word climate change is not even mentioned. We just talk about agriculture. And yet we have to think about Indian agriculture in such a way that it's adaptive to whatever future climate patterns that we're going to face. Right. And so that's an example of an India story climate grammar framing. And so this is what I call climate-centric design, right? Which is that you embed thinking with climate into all the systems that we are looking at. Those could be food systems, those could be transportation systems, those could be education systems. There are people in this course who have some experience with all of them. Right. So the goal of this session, there are three contexts in which I want to understand collective wisdom. Context number one is that climate change is a systems problem, right? Or is what we call a wicked problem. And that's Al Gore territory. Context two is that design can help us build robust systems. And good design, but of the emergent kind, like the internet, which Al Gore may or may not have invented, is the kind of design that we're looking for. And the third is, of course, the mental hooks that I have introduced in the second session. It's sort of a simple applications of cognitive science, right? So these are the three things that you should keep in your mind while we are going through this session. The elephant metaphor is one that we use in Socratus quite often, right? Which is that this huge wicked problem of actually life on Earth and the human impact on life on Earth has so many components to it. It's got peak oil, natural gas. This is not my drawing. It's something that I found on the internet. But there are different ways of looking at this really wicked problem. And everybody thinks that they have the right answer, but chances are that none of us have a view of the system as a whole. And the purpose of this course and generally of the kind of work we do is to create the tools and the spaces in which that collective understanding of the whole emerges naturally. But then the question is how? And what I call designing for wicked minds is creating these spaces in which it's possible for us to think through wicked problems in reflective, and holistic fashion, right? So not the kind of design that gets users hooked to your app if you're the kind of person who designs apps. It's also not, there's a term called human-centric design, which you might have heard of, but it's not human-centric design because that's still individual focused typically. But a world in which all technologies, all infrastructure takes climate change into account, and obviously there are regulations and policies to either slap you on the wrist or worse if you violate those principles. Right. So that's what I call climate-centric design. Right. I mean, a typical thing would be, let's say right now, for example, it's raining quite a bit in South India. And many parts of South India, Hyderabad in particular, have been flooded a lot, right? And so we have created urban infrastructure, especially roads, that don't seem to take this kind of urban flooding into account. Now imagine in the future, perhaps even this year, that there are extremes of rainfall as a result of climate change. And so you then need to create urban transportation infrastructure, roads, other forms of public transportation that have to be able to respond to flooding, right? Or rather, we don't want flooding, and therefore we don't want to pave all of our cities in such a way that water can't be rerouted, if not incorporated into the design of the roads. So that's a very, very important problem that you're probably already facing right now. Okay, so the question is this kind of wicked thinking, has it ever been done before? And if so, where and in what fashion? And a good example of that is, this is the burning of the Bastille. This is the French Revolution, 1789. And the question is, can we imagine, the advent of democracy itself as a kind of wicked? And that's what I'm going to try to convince you, that while it appears to be, chaotic and organic and emergent, it's actually a very subtle and collective wisdom that emerged in the last 300 years, right? And that's because, what does democracy address? It addresses moral complexity. The idea is that we all want to live our lives as equals, the famous liberty, fraternity, and equality. And we want to do so in a material world which has, lots and lots of new complex systems emerging, right? So the Industrial Revolution in particular in the West. Okay, so democracy is in that sense, is a very wicked problem. If you look at what's happening in the United States right now, you can see that there are competing, sometimes conflicting interests that don't agree on anything. And yet they both think that they have the right view of the truth, right? That they can that each side thinks that they know the whole system and they only have a particular view of it. And that's very, very common in democracy. And you could argue that successful democratic societies, and when I say successful, I don't mean that they are spectacular. It's just that they are able to manage these kinds of conflicts. In a successful democracy, you're able to give a space for the whole while recognizing that the parts don't have aligned interests. Right. So this is what I call democracy-centric design. Nobody ever says that, right? That democracy is something that is designed. But actually, I mean, it didn't fall from heaven. It's something that human beings created out of their collective labor, right? And when we pass laws in a democratic society, we usually do it in such a way that ideally these laws correct for past injustices. So reservations in India, affirmative action in the US, and so on. They prosecute violators of civil rights. Of course, you might say that in both India and the US, this is done more as lip service than as real reality. But nevertheless, we at least have a system that affords that possibility, right? And of course, we want to promote free and equal relations between individuals. So this is not a perfect system, but I think it has made the world a better place for many people, right? And so to me, that's the right way to think about wicked problems. Wicked problems can't be solved. Like it's not like there is it's not a maths problem where you write QED at the end and you're done. It's always a work in progress, and better rather than best is the way to think about wicked problems. Okay, so that's the framework that I want to introduce to you. I think I've shared this slide on other occasions. So you have a wicked problem. It has both material and moral complexity. And around that, you want to design a space, right? A kind of a moral commons where all the agents in that system have a space, have a place in it. And of course, it takes lots of time. It takes political pressure. It takes feedback loops between all of these components. Right. So what I want to do now is to give you two mental hooks. Actually, they're going to be frames in the way that I introduced that term, not morals. Two frames that will help us think through wicked problems and the idea of collective wisdom inside a wicked problem. Right. So one is what I call agent-centric design, right? Which is that instead of thinking of a wicked problem as something that just exists out there in the world, independent of us, and I think climate change is almost always talked about in that way, right? That climate change is, I mean, invariably, even the activists who talk about climate change say that, you know, politics does, I mean, the laws of physics don't obey politics. But I mean, that's a really bad framing in my view, right? Because we wouldn't be in this era of climate change if human activity had not brought us there. So to the extent that it's anthropogenic, which is to say that it's of human origin, we can't divorce physics from politics. And therefore we can't divorce the existence of people and other species who are embedded in this system that is facing climate change, right? And so there are many, many kinds of systems that we are all part of. You know, there could be, I mean, in this neoliberal era, there are always markets. There's always, you know, some form of media. People have aspirations. And of course, there's the larger framing of culture and of the society and government that we are part of, right? And we did cover gender 2 sessions ago. And you could say that gender cleavage is perhaps one of the most important and universal, unfortunately, cleavages that exist across human societies. Okay. So this is a technical term, what I call center surround, which is to say that at the center of a wicked problem, you frame it around the agents in the problem, and then you have all their features and characteristics around it, right? So that's what I call the center surround. It's a neuroscience term, very commonly used in cognitive science and neuroscience. And so instead of solving wicked problems directly, we focus our efforts on the minds of the agents embedded in the wicked problem. So this is, you could say, a new frame, right? A frame in which instead of saying, here's what climate change is, we reframe it as, here are the people who are embedded in a climate changed world. And so what does that reframing do to us or do for us, right? So instead of changing the food system, you would want to change the behaviors of farmers and their representatives. So how they use fertilizers, for example. Instead of sucking carbon out of the atmosphere, you want to change the consumption behaviors of the wealthy across the world, right? So this reframing immediately offers solution pathways that are different from an objective framing, right? Where the wicked problem is just out there. Okay, so that's one. The second is randomization, right? Also a frame, not a model. Randomization is an extremely powerful frame, and it's you know, it's something that's hard to grasp, but very useful once you grasp it, right? So if you remember the veil of ignorance that I introduced 2 weeks ago, I shouldn't have said last week, my last week. So the veil of ignorance is that you create policies in societies in which you don't know who you're going to be. But that's a very expensive cognitively expensive tactic, because you need to know who else is there in the room, who are the other people of whom you need to be ignorant, or right. So instead of doing it that way, there's a hack, which is to say that you can always just assign yourself to a random another person in the room and see the world from their perspective, right? So instead of not knowing who the entire room, not knowing which person in a room you're going to be, just assign yourself randomly to another person and see if you can represent the world from their perspective, right? So that's a way in which randomization can be useful. Most of you probably have heard of randomized control trials and how RCTs have become so important enough that Banerjee and Duflo got the Nobel Prize recently. And in this in this mode, we can imagine a thought experiment. So, we have elections every 5 years. Enormous amounts of money and other forms of influence are expended to make those elections happen. So here's a thought experiment. If you replace those 543 MPs who are elected with just 543 random individuals, right, Indian citizens, and you made them MPs, would we be better off, worse off, the same? So how would a society be run if the people on top are just randomly chosen rather than people who were, self-selected? That's an interesting question for you to think about, right? And so it tells you that randomization kind of inserts itself in almost every problem. So almost anything can be reframed both in the agent-centric fashion in the previous mental hook and as an exercise in randomization in this mental hook. So these are the two kind of takeaway messages that I want to offer to you today. Right. So for example, if you want to imagine the future of the tribal communities, the forest communities of India, right? How would we do that? So as you can see from the diagram itself, I've kind of reframed it already as a agent-centric problem, right? So you have at the heart of it, the tribal populations of India, or I shouldn't say tribal, forest populations with their non-tribal communities in them. How do we design solutions around them? What is the role of data? How do you take into account their development needs? How do you take into account the specific communities that they belong to? And of course, the non-human forest ecosystems that they're all part of, right? So that's a very basic question that India will have to address when it comes to climate change. And then the question is, what is the role of, can we, for example, take on the perspective of somebody in a forest population, and how to do that? These are the challenges that I want to put into the back of your mind. How are we doing for time? So we still have plenty of time for the breakout today. I wanted to give you some more time today in the breakout because it's a more expansive exercise than before. What I'm going to do is escape out of this. And so here is the breakout exercise, right? So I'm going to move to this. If you remember, almost all of you, I think there are 40 participants right now, so we can have about, let's say, 8 groups, so 5 each. I think that's a good number. So we can have 4 to 5. Some of us may not be in the session, in the breakout groups. So what I suggest is so if there are 8 groups, so group number 1 just takes the first 5. So this is an example of randomization right here, right? So here is the homework response from the last few weeks. I'm going to share that right here in the chat window. I'm going to put that here so everybody go quickly take a look at this, right? And in your breakout room, so if you're in breakout room number 1, you will just take these first 5 imaginations. Then breakout room number 2 will go from 6 to 10 and so on and so forth, right? So what I suggest is we do this 5 at a time, like 5 imaginations at a time. And your goal is to take those 5 and come up with a, wait, let's see if I can, yeah. So here's the breakout task, right? So as usual, you identify a note taker. Take a look at the submitted letters from the letters from the future. You need to synthesize 5 of those into a single collective letter from your group of 2030. So imagine yourself as a group in 2030, writing a letter to your current group today. But what you have to do is you have to synthesize those 5 uh, assigned letters into your collective letter. So how you do it is entirely up to you. You don't necessarily, it doesn't have to be a word-to-word match between what is there in those. Those are just prompts, right? So you have 5 prompts and you have to come up with a collective letter. So imagine you as a group in 2030, you're writing yourself a letter and you're using those 5. So what your job is essentially to take on an agent-centric design around those 5 people, right? So imagine those 5 people as the agents of 2030. You're it's an empathic exercise to get into their heads and write a letter to yourselves now, right? And I'm going to share this screen here again. So like last week, we have a Google Doc for the purpose of entering your there you go. Right, so I have entered the Google Doc link into the chat window. So whoever is the note taker in the room just needs to go into your group name, just so write down your names and of course check. So here's the prompt, check out the first. Now I can just say n equals 5. Oh, sorry. Right. So check out the first 5 letters and write a synthesis of those 5 from 2030 to 2020. So that's your task. So we can start the breakout rooms now. So what I suggest as a methodology, let me go back here, right? I think the best methodology might be to first read through them individually and then so spend some time sort of inhabiting their space and then coming to a more collective synthesis. Vivek, can we have a switch to the breakout room, please? You're back here.
And they were already like midway the exercise. They
ठीक है
were
करने
working
दो
on
फिर.
it. So I'm like, I'll basically I'll go through all the breakout rooms once, and like whichever one is silent, I'll stay there maybe.
हाँ, not a bad
That's
idea. ठीक
that's
है.
what I learned from Tarini last time. She was like going
Okay.
through all the breakout rooms.
Okay. Very good.
Okay.
I'm just going to stay muted till. So you said 35 minutes now?
Yes, 35.
Good. And you'll also give them three. So I'll give them 3 minutes each per.
Yes. 3 minutes. Acha, per group, this like final summary for per group.
हाँ 3 minute.
Okay,
So
okay,
you
good,
keep
good.
time that. मतलब हर एक को मतलब when it is close to 3 minutes, I'll also keep a stopwatch timer. ठीक
Okay,
है?
ठीक है.
ये गौतम विलग्रो कौन आया है भाई? So we'll have to send him to a.
But he won't know anything. Should we even admit him?
Um, I don't know what to do about this. Admit कर देते हैं क्या है?
ठीक है, I'll admit him. I'll send him to one of the breakout rooms. I'm just that he won't have the context. I'm not very sure like what will happen.
Let me
ठीक है, let me
just
just
check.
add him. I'm adding
Yeah.
him.
ठीक है.
Assign him to. Let's see.
Hi Gautam, we're just going to assign you to one of the breakout rooms. Hopefully they'll help you figure out what's happening there.
Hey, Gautam, you should have received a request to join a breakout room, na? Breakout room number 1. Okay, his audio is not connected.
Which breakout room were you in?
Hello, Anusha.
She's in breakout 7.
No, she's here. Should I move her to group number 7 again?
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay,
think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'll do that. So I'll add Anusha to breakout room 7. Uh, Aditya, you've just joined, right? Or you were a part of some breakout room earlier?
Just chat in the
Okay.
window. I think we. And Alok we can just assign to any room. Actually, maybe Alok, since it's already 10 minutes in. Yeah, you just joined. So Aditya, maybe the best thing is because yeah, exactly. Just wait. I think that's what we should do from now on because it's well into the breakout session. So
Yes.
anyone, it just would be disruptive.
I was in one of the breakout rooms and I saw like what happens. So it was quite descriptive that they had to take out like 5 minutes to explain the entire context. So it's better since it's just 35 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to mute myself. I'll be back in about 10 minutes or so.
Sure. Same.
Welcome back as everyone streams in. All right, we're ready to play the same game as last week. Vivek, can you ask? I think we can turn the toggle so that everyone can unmute themselves, and we should restart screen recording.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go. I hope everyone can see my screen. So we have group number 1 at Dhriti, Archana, and Suparna. So one of you, please, maybe this is as good a time as any to start sharing your story here. I'll give you about 2
Hi,
minutes.
can I start? Dhriti here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, good evening, everyone. We took up rows 1 to 5, and the first thing that we did was initially we were only 3 people, and then the third person just kept dropping off, I think, due to internet issues. So we took up the first 5 rows that were there, and the first thing that we did was we read up all these rows individually, and then we discussed the common aspects that came out of each of these letters that were written, and we started documenting them. So in the first thing we saw there was a lot of positivity. They spoke of positivity, and they spoke of the kind of development that has happened. There were good changes. So basically the letter spoke of all good things that have happened over the last 10 years. The second one was a little interesting because they looked, sorry, should I just go into the joint letter or?
Yes, I think represent the we rather than the I.
Okay, got it. Okay, so the joint letter. There is positivity in the air in 2030. There's a lot of greenery, sustainability in the world. People are being conscious of climate change. They're more compassionate towards people than what they were in 2020. There's a lot of education that is being developed around climate change. People are talking, educating masses and creating awareness about climate change. There's a lot of importance given to it. Good changes are happening. People are taking care of their health after the horrible pandemic that occurred 10 years back. We're taking good care of the health, and we're taking care of the world. And there are new diseases, and for those new diseases, there's care that's been taken up by these new people called recovery professionals. Then there is green economy. Economists have finally figured out that resources on the planet are finite, thankfully. So there's a consensus that they have built around climate change, which has led to carbon markets. Then sustainability has gone into cities, municipalities, and the environment is more popular. So that's the thing we got. If there's anybody, Suparna and Archana, if you have anything that I've missed out, please do add. Yeah.
No, nothing to add.
I think you covered.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Thank you. I really like the most optimistic thing in this, and perhaps the hardest thing that might happen, is economists figuring out that the resources on the planet are finite. I am really waiting for that day.
Sunday Suvarna ma'am. Like,
Yeah. I mean, if that happens, then I mean, I feel like economists are the priests of the 20th and 21st century, and they control everything else. So awesome. Thank you. This is now
Thank you.
6 through 10, and we've got Arnab, Shashi, Sucheta, Anurag. Any one of you, please go for it.
Yep. Yep. So
I would suggest again focusing on the we rather than like the earlier letters.
Okay, so I'll just start with the letter itself.
Mm-hmm.
So dear self, I haven't given proper beginning, but I'll start. So nature is prospering with positivity everywhere. Lakes are replenished. We are breathing clean air, and even the nature and wildlife are thriving. The job market has been completely changed. We have interdisciplinary jobs fused with personalized AI tech. But when we talk about economy, we are living in barter system. The nutritional value of food is high. Food wastage is regulated, and if it happens, it leads to investigation. There's no monarchy, no state nation, no nation state of any sort. Diversity is celebrated and is bringing people together. Everyone is just human being unafraid to be themselves. Most of the population in Europe have started identifying as neither male or female. Perks from government, if you work, you'll get perks from government if you work towards better climate. And it can go to the level where you will be given benefits if you decide to not have offsprings. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is how, despite some of the dystopias in the letters, we have chosen to pick up the utopian components, and I like that. I mean, we again have several more of these to go, so who knows? There will be some dystopias coming up down the document here. Yeah, the nation states disappearing is an amazing. I mean, I feel like that's something to explore further. I would really like to see that a little bit more. Like if this was fleshed out, what that world without nation states might look like. You know, we've been talking about this world governments for 100 years without getting too far in that direction. So thank you, Anurag.
Yeah,
and of course, if there are any other contributions from that group, please.
Yeah. I hope I covered everything.
Okay. I like this letter reading. I mean, so I feel like this is an easy exercise. Oh, this is a long letter, so go for it. Who's going to speak? Prachur, Rahul. I guess Prachur is since he's bolded, I'm guessing he's the note taker, but could be one of the others too.
So this is Rahul. I took notes. I'll just speak, and then everyone else feel free to. So we realized, as you know, in 2020s that we have to own our future, and so a lot of us and a bunch of people. Socratus became a very influential organization in decentralizing thinking and adopting climate change as a center of designing policies and using that to practice activism. And as a result of all of the collective activism, one trend that happened is that communities become decentralized, things became more local, economies became shifted locally, and clusters of self-centered communities started coming together. And it was a very pretty common sight across the country in India to take care of their own needs in a community-centric way, whether it is to generate energy or create a small economy that can sustain that cluster, or even in some cases when there is abundance, even in export in beyond that cluster. Things like sustainable technologies such as windmills, solar, etc., were the norm for generating energy. The economies also started becoming more circular in nature. Waste being converted into products that met the demands locally, and so you kept the economy sort of going within the local offices as we knew in 2020 are all gone now, and work as we used to exist, and so it became individualistic, but also with a sense of community. So people did what they want to do to sort of add value to the society. Not that the so there's also this regressive forces that sort of show their dark side from time to time, whether it's caste violence or other forms of regression. The communities have sort of realized that they have the power to collectively push back. One other thing that has happened is the technology has become like a weaving, has been decentralized, and now it's sort of weaved into every decisions that communities make, individuals make for themselves, with an eye to make sure that anything that we do is done sustainably and with climate change in mind, the center of it. The shape of politics have changed because of activism. Youth are the most represented, and we are seeing the results of that reflected in the government action. Rivers are all clean. Rape is a thing of the past, and agriculture is sustainable and circular. People who grow what they need, they're not dependent on doles and dependent on a food system that people security are not dependent on that. While we have made progress, there's still global risks that keep reminding us that it's not done. It's a work in progress. So there's financial risks and the talks of global recession and then democracy under siege continue to sort of haunt us. But what people who have realized the power of organizing locally continue to push back, and there is great hope for the future.
Great. Thank you, Rahul. Any other contributions from this group? Or I really like the idea of Socrates being influential. Somehow I'm biased in thinking in that direction. I don't know why. Just kidding. It would be great to think more about how decentralization and technology and community might come together. I mean, that feels like a theme that is really worth building on. I feel like that's a very important direction for us. I mean, technology is not going away, but how to democratize it is going to be a great challenge. And especially given what's happened with Facebook and fake news, I feel this is going to be an ongoing obstacle for us. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you. Thank you, team.
All right, group 4. So we have Shachi, Sonali, Kaustubh, Alpana, and Shambhavi.
And anybody from my group wants to go ahead?
You should go ahead. I think you have the idea.
Okay. I think we didn't get around to crafting an actual letter, but we just had. So I'm just reading out. There was an exodus of privileged folk from cities to rural areas, although rural areas were in a bad way. People were at least more self-sufficient. Women farmers came to the fore. And now cities have also taken to farming. There is a growth in urban gardening. There is much more emphasis on self-sufficiency, having learned somewhat from the pandemic. The world in 2030 has not changed much. The humans continue to look at themselves as the entitled species. Humans have probably moved towards the realm of spirituality, and there is an ever-growing divide between the rural and urban areas. Capitalism has become stronger than ever, and the monopoly of a few is the norm. Although public institutions continue to exist, they have not been able to bring about much change, but efforts are underway. Climate change has quickened, and availability of fresh water is a major issue. People have tried to change their lifestyle, but much change has not really occurred. And I should say in this, just one more thing, what we felt was a clear kind of move away from the city towards the rural areas. And although conditions are difficult also in the rural area, but there's more kind of vitality happening there with organic farming and those processes. And also within the cities, people are more resilient. I mean, they're trying to fight the power.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Kaustubh. And I think that's going to be, I feel like psychological resilience, both at the individual and community levels, is going to be a big thing. I feel like that's, again, underemphasized in our response to climate change, which is, typically, okay, what are the policies? What are the, how do you fight corporations? All of that is important. But I also think that how to become more resilient communities is going to be probably the defining task.
Well, I mean, the pandemic is kind of a training ground for psychological resilience, right? I mean,
yeah.
In 7 months, and people are, I think, starting to crack.
Yeah, I mean, nobody said it's going to be easy. I mean, maybe maybe it won't happen, as you guys concluded here, that people have tried to change their lifestyle. Yeah, this is the first, you could say, short dose of reality amongst the responses so far, and thank you so much. So we can go to the next one, group 5.
Yeah, group 5, there is Dia, Sneha, Remy, and I, Vikram. I was the note taker, so I'll read it out. Dear 2020, it's 2030 now. The world has changed. There is widespread use of technology and data in the service of people. Technology has evolved to track the socio-economic and climate issues, and the advancement of technology gives the better result before the anticipated time frame. There is a retreating back to nature, connecting more with nature and older ways of living. For instance, many unschooling ways of thought are becoming popular, with children becoming independent explorers who learn through experimentation and observation within natural habitats, welcoming and celebration of diversity of wisdom and intelligence. There are multiple battles being fought and continue to be fought. Develop grit to fight battles within and without. Some countries have managed to reverse damage caused to the earth. There is homogeneity. The struggle is to lead one's life with balance and with respect towards nature. A new world order is in place. Old world leaders have disappeared. A lot of healing has happened. It's a world moving towards equality, fairness, and harmony. People have become more responsible towards the natural resources they consume. The world continues to make attempts towards healing from the excesses and the mistakes of the past. See you soon.
All right, great. We will see ourselves soon, I guess, in 10 years. Thank you, Trivikram. I feel like this new world order is in place is what, I mean, this is, of course, yeah.
Yes.
I hope.
Yes.
I hope.
But one of the letters that we had was slightly on the dystopian side. With inequality increasing and things like that, we sort of, as a group, willfully brushed that aside and said it's just one of the rest of the letters. So we stuck to the upbeat positive frame from the other letters.
अच्छा, ये शतरंज के खिलाड़ी वाला मॉडल तो नहीं है?
नहीं.
So wonderful. Thank you so much. I mean, I'm amazed at, I feel like as we aggregate, certain kinds of themes keep coming up. One is sort of return to nature, perhaps failure to do so as well. And one is sustainable agriculture, like, sort of a greater focus on both the people who grow food for us and how to make that more sustainable and the challenges in doing so. Okay, group 6.
Hi, I'm Aparajita. I was the note taker for group 6. We were Jayant, Akshaya, and Abhairaj. So this was our letter. Dear all, how are you doing? Enjoy the calm before the storm, because there are going to be a succession of wars over different things. The world after 2020 has seen successive improvements in some areas, but some problems of the 20s have worsened. There were disagreements between many different factions over many righteous causes that became fads. One of the points over which wars are being fought is data. Eventually, the war resolved because many of these factions came together. They had to unite for the greater good in order to survive. Data science has become very ingrained into our systems. It is now incorporated into governance and policy making, which are very reliant on complex data. Data driven processes are being used to drive a circular economy. It is driving models with multiple objectives that drive social good. So, the vast majority of people don't need to do much. Uh, so, data driven policies have simplified the lives of people. So, they have gone back to their roots and live in harmony with nature. So, basically, kids don't need to play with dead clay. And there is also a diversity of wisdom and intelligence. The world has changed and the power crazy dictators are gone, and business leaders have embraced new models, and work and culture are no longer obsessed with consumption. Uh, it is a time of healing, learning, loving, trying, experimenting, succeeding, and falling flat on our faces, undertaking the generally heroic, mundane task of living simply, quietly in harmony with the world. The world has personally become better for each of you, but never stop fighting or give up no matter how bad the situation. With great love.
Awesome. So, quick question: what does it mean when you say kids don't play with that clay anymore? I feel like
I
that.
think this was editing gone wrong. There were points about how people have gone back to their roots and kids now play with nature. There was one letter about kids being involved in growing food. They are live very close to nature and learn in nature. So this was with that. Uh, yeah. So the context was not very clear.
Okay. So this is again bringing this. What I find very interesting here is, on the one hand, there is a kind of a strong, you could say, uh, modernist impulse, right? Data science has become very ingrained into our system. So it's a Google view of the world. But at the same time, people are closer to nature. And I would love to understand, like, it would be an interesting thing to pursue further. Like, how are these actually compatible? Is it possible to live closer to nature while also having data science rule our lives? It strikes me as an interesting kind of thought experiment challenge to push further. I would love to see, more developed version of this, or it falls apart and we are just robots. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, we've got group 7. Arvind, Namasivayam, and then Anusha and Stuti. No? Have they all dropped off? Oh, no, I see.
Stuti was our note taker, but I don't see her in the chat. Anyone wants to, okay, I'll do it. So, yeah. So, dear 2020ers, the challenges faced by us in the last decade were around climate, migration, political crisis, that there was less space for different viewpoints and opinions. While tackling issues of climate change, political challenges became equally daunting. Fake news and misuse of technology became a huge problem. And there were a far deadlier virus which came a decade ago, which devastated communities even further. Uh, because of the circumstances, we were guilty of not spending enough time with our loved ones and people around us. However, to deal with all these changes, several systems and processes came into play. A fairer education system came in where caste and gender and uh, 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 caste and gender played much a smaller role. Foster care for children and orphans was put in place. Health insurance became more universal. Uh, innovators, researchers, and policymakers came together to put together effort to stop climate change and come up with a more human-centric approach to development. One party system developed over time, which I'm not sure what the next one was. But having done all of this, there are hopes and pathways for future. We are hoping that we'll have a more greener future, more sustainable transport, COVID and other viruses getting over, and India will develop into an economic superpower and also develop in HDI indications.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is sort of, again, I mean, it's almost into dystopia, but not quite there. But one of the interesting things is the political crisis, right? Which is that, again, in climate change, we think about the economic crisis a lot, but so far we haven't paid much attention to, say, political crisis and breakdown. And chances are it will happen. I don't know if it will happen in India, hopefully not. But I think it'll definitely happen in some parts of the world. And I feel that's very much something to understand further, right? Like, what will be the political crisis coming out of climate change? And it'll be great to develop that idea if you want to take it up. Thank you. So group 8, we have Ranjit and Sumit.
Yeah, hi, this is Sumit. I was the note taker. So I'll just read out the letter. Hey, the last 10 years have been quite interesting. It was as if the onset of the COVID pandemic triggered something in us, a realization that anything can change at any time. It started with the academics, soon gripped the businessmen, and ultimately reached most of the human population. Change, the only constant. Hypercharged by a massive proliferation of digital channels. All of us became more adaptable on a day to day, hour to hour basis. A study on EQ with nearly 20,000 participants found that the scores of the population had gone up by nearly 25 points in the last 10 years. Unsurprisingly, adaptability and responsiveness at all levels also meant that there were several failed experiments. But we learned. We've learned to move quick, but we've also learned to learn slow. Some regions did get stuck in some bad loops, but so far we've all pulled together quite brilliantly. This is fun. Love always, you.
Thank you, Sumit. Again, I'm finding this theme of how kind of technology, like this hyper technologization of our world, and combine that with climate change, which feels much more physical worldish. I think that's I feel like that's a theme that's come up. EQ going up by 25 points. I mean, that's an interesting thought. But it could also mean that we are all that much more manipulative. Who knows? I feel like
we discussed that point, especially that that will mean that there are a lot more of those kind of things.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think that's it. So thank you again, everybody, for all these. So I feel like certain themes have just come up again and again. But the one thing I want to say is, again, notice how in the process of just trying to represent other people's views, we sort of automatically go into a selective view, right? We see the things that we want to see, which is actually not that wrong. I mean, that's how we are built as human beings. And I think that's a good thing. But it also shows the challenges of actually truly representing collective wisdom and how to do that. And that's a theme I think that we'll have to keep playing with, because we want to be as expansive as possible, but also represent what we genuinely feel and not some fake solidarity. So with that thought, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll play this game of coming back on video, saying bye and going on with our lives.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week. And we'll have a session on the Sensome next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.